Hello, I'm Aldernero, and today I'm going to show you how to make designs similar to the one you see on the screen now. Normally I write code to generate my designs, but sometimes I just like to play around in Inkscape with path effects and extensions and see if I can make something that looks cool. That's what I used for this. I don't remember the exact steps to make this because I was just playing around, but I remember the general procedure, so let's see what we can make. So first, I'm going to start with an empty Inkscape document, and the first thing we'll do is just get rid of the page borders. So the first step is to start with a barcode. So I'm going to go to Extensions, Render, Barcode, and I'm going to use this middle option, Data Matrix. It also works pretty well with QR codes. So the data matrix is going to be variable in length depending on how long your text is. So let's just input something, doesn't really matter. The main thing is we just want 4 squares down here. And now we have a single grouped object, and we want to rearrange these little squares into one big square. So first we'll ungroup this and then group the individual squares. Just Control G. And when we're done with that, now we'll just use the flip vertically and flip horizontal operations. Put these into one big square. Alright. Now the next step is to ungroup all of these so that we have just a bunch of tiny squares. And let's remove the fill and add a stroke so we see each of the squares. And now we're going to simplify all of these squares by using the path simplify function. And you can see that didn't do anything because these are still rectangle objects and not paths. So actually what I need to do first is path object to path. So now each of those squares is a path instead of a rectangle, and we should be able to do the simplify procedure. And you can see each time we do it, it rounds the edges a little bit, makes it not so precise. And what we want to do here is we want to have adjacent squares kind of overlapping each other a little bit. So that might be enough. Let's try it one more time. And then we're going to convert all of these individual tiny paths into one path with union. And if we have some decent overlap, then yeah, this is kind of the look I'm going for. Alright, so now we have one path, and now we're going to modify the path and give it a whirl. So this will kind of give you some nice curved edges. You can adjust the amount. Let's try 7. I think I've used that before. Okay, 7 looks good. Now is when the path effects come in. These are a great feature of Inkscape. If we go to path effects, it opens the path effects menu on the right, and you can add a path effect with this plus button here. And so these are similar to the extensions, but you'll see in a minute why they're so useful. So the first path effect I want to apply is called perspective. Let me see, where is it? Perspective envelope. Where did it go? Alright, there it is. We have perspective envelope. And you can see when it doesn't actually, well, it does apply the effect, and you have some options here. But the way to interact with all these path effects is to switch to the Edit Paths by Node tool. And then the path effect the perspective envelope effect will allow us to adjust these handles, make it look like it's kind of going into the page. So that looks good. So the next effect we'll add, and this one we're going to do repeatedly to get the fractal-like look, is rotate copies. So if we apply that once, you can see it kind of does exactly what it says. It makes a number of copies of the object and then just rotates them a certain number of degrees. So the default is it makes 6 copies and rotates each of them 60 degrees. You can change this. So maybe let's start with 7. And then there are a couple of methods for what it's going to do with all these copies. Normal is it just stacks the copies on top of each other. There is kaleidoscope, which makes some sort of cuts along the rotation angles. And then there is fuse, which I don't know exactly what it does, but it ends up with more of a sparse interior. So for this first go, let's do kaleidoscope, and then add another rotate copies path effect. And now you can kind of see the power of these effects. They stack on top of each other, as you can quickly build up something that fairly complex with just a few steps. So when I look at this, the interior seems a little busy, especially if I'm going to plot this. That's a lot of intersecting lines that I don't like. So let's check out some of these different modes. That makes the whole thing way too sparse, so let's try fuse paths. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then, you know, this is generally the overall thing I'm looking for, but the great thing about keeping these path effects in this list is I can go back to the first rotation, and maybe I don't want 7 copies, maybe I want 6. And you can change individual options in these path effects, and it will kind of recompute everything. So that's kind of cool. Now I can go back to the second rotation and play around with it again. Maybe I want more copies. And it can get computationally intensive, so it might take a little bit of time, but you know, this is interesting. So once you've played around and you have something that you like, and you want to convert this just to a typical path, then the last step is to go to path, object to path, and you'll see that in the path effects window, everything is gone. You're finished, and now this is just a typical path like any other. Go ahead and do more operations, or be done and plot it, or whatever you want to do with it. So I hope this was helpful, and thanks for watching the video.